We know that digital ownership will be a big part of the lives of future humans. So 10 years from now, I believe that fully 50% of all luxury goods, as an example, will be pure digital purchases. But
that's a bold proclamation, 50%.
I think so.
This episode is sponsored by Safe, the account abstraction leader on Ethereum. All right, everyone, we are back. We just wrapped up an amazing Consensus 2024. We had over 15,000 people on the ground. We had 600 speakers, over 200 sponsors. It was a true experience that is unmatched. I think that the optimism as well in the crypto industry is really palpable. Unlike last year when we had Consensus in a bear market where we had a lot of builders there still doing amazing work. We're seeing the fruits of that effort this year. In addition, there was a lot of optimism, I think, on the regulatory front that helped make Consensus a special experience. The Bitcoin ETF, the pending ETH ETF, I think allows people to feel comfortable that there's more of a tacit endorsement of crypto these days and of blockchain specifically. And I think that was really felt amongst the whole conference. We had a ton of brands show up, many of which we will turn into some Gen C episodes in the future. So I think there's also a lot of really wonderful sentiment around people still continuing to build in Web3 across gaming, across collectibles, and even some really interesting conversations on AI. So what we wanted to do this week is bring you a conversation that Avery and I did with Ian Rogers from Ledger. Ian was on our show about a year ago, and this year we thought it would be great to sort of bring him back on the stage and talk about where we are at in this moment. In addition, Ledger has a ton of new announcements of some really exciting stuff that they're working on, so we cover that a bit as well. But I think Ian also, having gone through digital music, being the chief digital officer at LVMH, all of the different roles he's had over the last 20 years, I think also gives us a keen insight on someone who really has helped create the idea that digital property is important. So if you're in the digital music space, going from owning physical albums and CDs to digital songs was one of those transformational moments that I think we're going to see across a lot of different industries. And we talk a little bit about that with Ian. He's always just so interesting and smart on this topic. So yeah, we sat down with Ian on the Gen C stage and had a wonderful conversation with him on where we are at this moment, why is it so important, and also how the market seems to have matured and the industry is maturing. And a ton of stuff from Consensus to take away. Next week, we talk to Avery. We will break some of that down. But I do think that this is an amazing conversation for y'all to listen to. And I really just feel really enthusiastic after an amazing week in Austin. Consensus is going to Toronto next year, and we're going to Hong Kong. So for anyone who is interested in this industry, get those on the calendar. We'll be in Hong Kong in February and in Toronto in May, because I do think there is something that's unmatched about being able to gather in person with people who are all trying to create the industry of the new internet. And to me, it's just so important that that is something we all try and focus on. So with that, let's get to the conversation between Avery, myself, and Ian Rogers. We'll see you after the break. Safe is enabling ownership for all with smart accounts. With over $100 billion in total value stored across over 14 networks, Safe accounts are embedded everywhere, including DeFi Saver, WorldCoin, Dracula app, and more. Build and use the most battle-tested smart account in Ethereum. Visit safe.global.
So for this conversation, please welcome superstar moderators and co-hosts of the Gen C podcast, Sam Ewan and Avery Kennedy, as well as the legend himself, Ledger's Chief Experience Officer, Ian Rogers.
All right. Welcome for everybody for coming. So we're going to have a conversation. Ian and Avery and I spoke, I think it was over a year ago on our podcast, Gen C. And we thought this would be a great venue for us to have another conversation, where we've come in the last year. But first, I just put a couple things together for anyone who might not know Ian. So if we can get the slides up.
Who doesn't know Ian? Let's be real.
Right. So,
Hi, guys.
Ian, instead of
you telling your bio, I thought maybe the Bloomingpedia would tell your bio, which I found from
I didn't know that
Bloomington,
existed.
Indiana,
Yeah.
which says Ian Rogers was a student at Indiana University in 1993. Since then has been involved in the core of the digital music revolution by working in places like Nullsoft, Yahoo Music, Topspin, Beats Music, and the creation of Beats One and Apple Music. While studying computer science at IU, he created an early internet music streaming program that worked from a Next computer.
That's why I have the Next logo tattooed on my leg, circa 1991.
There you go. That's why. And which I assume that sort of got us to, let's go next slide. There we go. To this, which was the first way I encountered digital music.
I think that Sugar Ray is really unfortunate.
I thought this was your playlist.
That was the song of a summer at one point, Ian.
Yeah. Must have been that year.
Yeah. And
Mark McGrath was great on Rock and Roll Jeopardy, though.
yes.
He killed. He destroyed.
I like that it's also a playlist of one song that just plays over and
Yeah,
over as you
exactly.
cry in your dorm.
Well, you don't need one. If you've got Falls Apart by Sugar Ray, what else do you need?
Yeah, exactly. Then you had a little bit of a movement, making some important things with some up-and-coming artists, such as
Yeah.
Dr. Dre with Beats,
Yeah.
which then sold to Apple. And here you are looking wistfully in your next role at LVMH as you're sitting next to Bernard, but really looking into the future, I think.
I think so.
And the future you saw was this device, which Ian has brought a couple of these with him. It's the Ledger Stacks, which, and we'll talk about it, had some interesting challenges getting to be actually birthed.
Definitely.
But here we are. And so, this is sort of a very abbreviated history of Ian's career. But when Ian and I were talking about this session, you made a comment that I thought was a great place to start, especially for the sort of immersive worlds and gaming stage that we're on. And it starts with this tweet, right? And this tweet says that Bitcoin has increased 12,464% in the last 10 years. The only thing to outperform it was NVIDIA. And I thought, when you mentioned this, not only is this such a fascinating sort of bit of history, but I thought you also had a really good take of what does this tell us about going into the future. So maybe let's start off with you sort of dissecting this tweet.
Well, I think what we lived through was this revolution of information that was the internet, right? So to me, the contextualization of the internet is we used to have limited information distribution. What's available on the FM spectrum, or how many channels on television, or how many magazines can you put at the magazine rack? And that's really what the internet exploded. It said that anybody who registers a domain name can be a provider of information, right? And so everything that the internet brought us really was downstream of that. And I think that what we have and what's represented in this chart is other emerging movements. One of them being digital ownership. The Byzantine general problem that was solved 15 years ago by Satoshi Nakamoto in the Bitcoin white paper, and everything that's brought us and why we're here at Consensus. But also artificial intelligence, of course, and moving forward in terms of what our machines are capable of doing for us and with us. And these are two sides of the same story to me, where if AI brings us digital abundance, then it's actually necessary to have digital scarcity. So I think in the world that we're going into, having proof of human, proof of you, and as well as provenance, being able to prove I am the person who said that. It's not far-fetched. It's actually today that we already live in a world where web pages that are generated by AI feed AI. Right, so the provenance of what goes into that. We already live in a world where a CFO in Hong Kong was tricked out of $25 million by people that weren't actually his colleagues, who he thought were his colleagues. Like that's not a future world, that's a current world. In that world, digital scarcity is a must. These two things go together, and security is a must, because we will have digital ownership in our digital lives. And if digital ownership, then self-custody and security. Those are not negotiable.
But let me just jump in on one thing, which is we shouldn't forget that NVIDIA also powered the spatial computing revolution on the GPU side, and we have 3.2 billion gamers in the world, so they're going to expect all the things you just said, but also in environments that are hyper-realistic and 3D and spatial and additive, right?
Yep, and in those worlds, they will have digital ownership.
Yes.
I like your point just now, Ian, of this isn't a world that's in the future, this is in the now. And as we can see from this tweet, Bitcoin and individual ownership of digital items is happening in the now. But it's happening for still a relatively small percentage of the population. You focus on the experience of technology and helping, whether it was the MP4 or digital financial revolution, you've been helping people sort of meet technology where it's going through developing incredible experiences. What exists today, and what do we need to sort of get there towards where you're talking about us heading into the future of sort of digital identity, digital ownership, provenance, et cetera? How do you see, where are we today, and what do we need to get to tomorrow?
To me, where we are is, it's 2002 in internet timeline, and in 2002, I had been working on the internet for more than 10 years. I had a computer on my desk where I did my internet work. I had a phone that folded in half and was fundamentally bad at the internet, and then I had an iPod, right? And today, obviously, all of those have converged into one device.
Yep.
And the media itself had been unbundled from the compact disc into the 99-cent download, and then rebundled back into, whether you want to say it's Spotify or Netflix type of things. And so I think we're there again, where we know that digital ownership will be a big part of the lives of future humans. So 10 years from now, I believe that fully 50% of all luxury goods, as an example, will be pure digital purchases. But
that's a bold proclamation, 50%.
I think so, and I can back that up, and maybe it'll be 15 years, but I can back that up. But I think that, that's true, and at the same time, our phones are fundamentally bad at digital ownership, right? And that is both from a security perspective, but also a usability perspective, right? I mean, we know that to actually participate in this ecosystem is very difficult. To me, that's actually why the Bitcoin ETF is important, because it's a user interface. Hello, I'd like to buy some Bitcoin. Oh, good, thank you. Like, that's a very simple interface, as opposed to okay, I would like to trade
on the open market, etc.
Or I mean, I would like to trade a meme coin on Solana. Like, okay, you're down the rabbit hole, immediately. I would like to bridge to Base to buy that NFT. Is like, and those interfaces are, Coinbase Wallet does a very good job. At the same time, it's not something that an average internet user would do without a lot of, without work put into it. But these are problems that, they do work themselves out, and you can see, big differences. I mean, even look at today versus the 21 cycle, right? I mean, in the middle of 21, our product Ledger fundamentally didn't work with MetaMask, at the kind of the peak of the cycle. Yeah. And today, you have really great applications like Robbie, like Coinbase Wallet, like Ledger Live, which have made these experiences a lot easier. So we've already made a lot of progress. That's where I think that Ledger Stacks is kind of the iPod in this.
Okay.
In that, there were lots of MP3 players actually before the iPod. History has just kind of forgotten about them, and they were for enthusiasts. They were for people who had MP3s, and then you were like, oh, cool player, and you got one, right? But after the iPod, it was the case that somebody might walk into a Best Buy and go, I don't have any digital songs yet, right, but I know I want to move there from my CD Discman, and I trust this product, and I'm going to start there. And I think that this is that same sort of thing, where I think in Christmas time of 2024, someone could say, I don't have any Bitcoin yet, but they walk into a Best Buy and they buy a Ledger Stacks, and they just feel comfortable starting there. And they can buy their first Bitcoin using Ledger Live. They can do self-custody securely with Ledger Stacks. It's like that's I think where we need to be.
That's progress, right? What exists today is there's a number of intermediaries, there's a number of sort of direct solutions, but what needs to get us the experiences of tomorrow are integrating these solutions to in a more seamless capacity.
Correct.
And Ledger Live is helping us. Stacks is helping us.
Yeah, Stacks plus Live plus that ecosystem around it.
Right. And Ian, I think when we look at the idea, I showed a stat yesterday that some predictions by 2026, we are going to have 80% of all information on the internet will be synthetically generated, right? So we won't be able to trust 4 out of 5 things we see. So we also need the ability for us to use, whether it's a Stacks or some device that says, I want to sign that I'm human. I want to say that I actually created this. And I want to do so in a way that doesn't mean Twitter can mine me for that, right? So I know we talked about the idea of federated data, of ZK proofs, that also combined with this gives us a lot more power than we have in today's Web 2 ecosystem. And I guess I wonder your thoughts on how much the Web 2 ecosystem is going to be trying to fight back and say, no, you still want to keep it to the rails, even though we're not going to solve the misinformation problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your stat about 80% being synthetic data kind of tells the whole story in terms of what it is we're going to need to sort through that. So I definitely think that look, the Web 2 internet that we have is not necessarily the one that we asked for, right? It's not the one that we imagined in the 90s when we were imagining the power of the internet. And I think that digital ownership gives a ton of power back to the consumer. And I think it really will. And it will do it not because we're righteous and we're in a kind of a free software foundation kind of way, even though many of us believe in those ideals. It has to be utility for the consumer. But this is where I think if you look at, I think if you look at what OpenAI has done this year in terms of really betting on the interface being kind of conversational.
Yep.
If you look at, I know that Humane and the Rabbit R1 have been kind of panned as launches, but the question is that immature or is it actually a bad idea? And I would argue that if you look at a device with the promise of the Rabbit R1, but from a foundation of digital ownership, then it makes more sense, right? Because the notion that I'm going to tell the Rabbit R1 to book me a flight to Miami, and that it's going to have all of my logins across all of the sites that it would take to do that, as well as my payment information, and then it's going to go like in a scraping the web kind of way to do that work, that seems really fragile and a little absurd and a little like services like TripIt in the 2000s. Yeah. Which we're trying to do that. There were good ideas and good utility, but like it's a cat-mouse game that just doesn't work. If instead you start to have from a basis of ownership, where instead of my preferences being behind logins on 2,000 sites across the internet with my logins stored in one password, right? Instead, this is all, I own my preferences and I can federate what I want to each of those sites. Then that task from Rabbit R1 makes sense. Because it can say, okay, I'm going to go do this for you. May I have your Delta ID? Well, yes, you may, and that will pull a certain set of preferences. Oh, I found you these sites, or these flights. Does this work for you? I like that. Yes, and I'm going to approve the payment, from my method of payment. And that is something that can be done in a secure and trusted and permissionless way. I mean, even yesterday, I spent a full hour trying to buy Nicki Minaj tickets for my 17-year-old, and eventually had to use my ex-wife's Amex, right? Because I can't be trusted, to actually even pay for those, on the Web 2 internet, right? So if you imagine a place where
you weren't a scalper. If you were a scalper, you would have gone right through.
Yeah, but the point is that like if you approach that from a basis of you own your data in a secure way. Actually the improvement on the internet is real. Like it's a real user experience improvement that brings you things that Rabbit R1 and Humane kind of promise. And I think that you get there because it solves a real consumer problem, not because we have ideals around ownership and self-custody.
So let's talk a little bit more about this concept of federating your data, because that scenario you just explained sounds really exciting. Who wouldn't want that, right? Especially in a world where there's so much fraud and so many barriers happening in the world of Web 2 right now, and that's only accelerating through AI. So do you think that platforms like Twitter and TikTok would play along, or do you think we're still going to be in walled Gardenville for a while?
I think that they will play along, and I'm not sure that it needs to be decentralized and on-chain necessarily, right? Okay. But I do think that they certainly need to know, is there a human being on the other side of that keyboard? To your point about synthetic information. So I think that they will play along in that way. I think proof of humanity will become quite important. I think proof that the person who said that is who you think they are, and the provenance of that data, I think that is, there's a big motivation, for that to be real and to be better. So I think they'll play along in that way. And I think just generally speaking, look, whether it's your gym membership or your US passport, those are issued by centralized authorities and they can be revoked by centralized authorities. Now they could be useful because if I have on-chain identification saying that that's your passport ID, now the application on the other side can know that you're a unique individual and that you're not logging in from more than one place at a time, or that maybe these two IDs belong to the same human individual. So there's good data there. But do those themselves as identifications need to be decentralized? I would say no. But I think things like property rights and speech absolutely do need to be decentralized, and you can't have freedom without them being decentralized. And so I think we strike a balance where we're using the technology for kind of trustless identification, and we have, with the side effect is that we do actually have ownership, and that ownership is not only about owning the digital good, it's about using the digital good. It's about I have the right to do what I want with that digital identification, and applications can be built on top of that have not been imagined by the identification issuer, as an example. Right. And I think that's what the Internet of the future looks like.
So Ian, we have about 5 minutes left. I want to make sure we talk about Stacks. At Consensus last year it was right after you first launched Stacks. Here we are a year later.
Announced. I'm going to make it small.
Sorry, first announced. Here we are a year later, just starting to ship. It sounds like you guys put a video out the other day about how all the challenges you guys went through. Crypto and a lot of the crypto companies we see out here on the show floor are still pretty much focused on software. You guys were like, nope, we're going to do hardware because that's what Ledger does with the software layer. How hard was that? And like now that you know what you know, tell us about that journey of getting to finally being able to launch, because you also caught a lot of flack, right? Yeah. In the comm side.
Yeah. Well, and I think, please everyone watch the like 25-minute video that we released this week, because it actually presents the story quite well. And to me, it's a very personal story because it started with my friend Tony Fadell saying, I have a vision for this device. And this is exactly the device that he described to me, which I love too, because we explored 8 other industrial designs, and we ended up with the one that he originally described to me, where he said it should denote value, meaning the size of a credit card, but also Ledger customers have more than one. It's like having more than one bank account for a different purpose, a checking account, a savings account, a brokerage account. And what does the future sort of stack of cash with the rubber band look like? So he had this vision to use e-ink technology that bends, and this is the world's first organic TFT. So instead of silicon on glass, this is an organic substrate on plastic. And this technology came out of Cambridge 30 years ago, and it's never been productized before until literally this week. A month ago, the CEO of E-Ink told me, organic TFT is still unproven. And I said, no, it's not. He said, it's unproven until you ship that product. Right. So now it's proven. Right. But Tony had this very ambitious product design. So first of all, why hardware and not just software? Because to be secure, you really need 3 things. You have to have a secure chip where your private key is generated and stored. You have to have a secure OS where your transactions are done. And you have to have a secure display where you can see what you're doing. And your phone doesn't have those 3 things. A software wallet is not capable of having those 3 things. A wallet without a screen is not capable of having those 3 things. And this is really the only way to actually solve that problem. You have to have a secure chip where the operations are done. Now the hard part is then driving a screen with a secure chip. I mean, you're driving a display with effectively the chip that's in your credit card. So that's not what the chip was designed for. The chip was designed for security, not performance, right? And so that's the sort of the feat that's been done here. The difficult part really was the screen. And that's why I say, please watch the video, because you'll hear the CEO and chairman of E-Ink talk about it. You'll hear the CEO of Flex Enable, who's the company that actually makes the chemicals recipe that goes into the screen, talk about it. And the reality is like this is, as Ben Horowitz would say, the hard thing about hard things, especially with hardware, is you don't know what you don't know. And as Chuck from Flex Enable says in the video, when you hit a problem, you don't know if it's going to take you 4 weeks or 4 months to solve that problem. There really was, this was possible, but not mass producible. So we were able to make them, but we weren't able to make them at a yield that was high enough to make it economically viable until this year. So we're super proud to finally have them, and it really is, like, please do watch the video, because you'll see, I think you'll watch it and go, oh yeah, wow, shit, that's really something. Wow, so yeah.
What an incredible story and what an incredible year. And I think, many of folks who are here at Consensus will recognize Ledger's contributions to sort of the culture of crypto. And one thing that I love about the way that this is designed is it's designed to have immediate utility for current crypto users, but it's also designed to bring that next generation of crypto adopters into this sort of world and ecosystem. And in a fashionable way, because I saw on High Sobriety that there is a wonderful little wallet accessory coming out. Can you talk about how you enable some of those partnerships to make something like this sexy to fashionistas?
Sure. I mean, I think part of it is industrial design that Tony has done. Part of it, to your point, is getting those use cases beyond just like, say, DeFi, right? I mean, so one of the things that you'll see this summer, and I hope that you'll have one for this purpose, is that we have an app on here called Security Key. And Security Key does pass keys more securely than your phone, 2FA in a more easy to use way than your YubiKey, right? So there's NFC in here, so you can like just open it up, tap it to your phone, and use it as your 2FA or your pass key. So that's a use case that's really for a class of people that's beyond the people who are here at Consensus. But also, to your point, some of that is positioning, right? So working with people to make it something that it isn't just for deep cold storage. No, I use this for 2FA and I carry it around with me all the time. It's in my wallet and it has a little bit of spending money on it, and it's the way that I log into Instagram. So I think that's where where you go from something. The Ledger's 10 years old, right? And we've been the choice for people who care about security and self-custody for 10 years. And then the question is, how do you take security that your phone can't do to a much broader group of people? Because as we live more digital lives, digital security becomes more and more important to us. You hear, like, Wall Street Journal just ran an incredible series of stories over the past year about people getting their iPhones stolen and locked out of iCloud forever. That's not a geek problem.
No.
That's a normal person problem, which is avoidable with a device like this.
All right, well, that's all the time we have. Ian, thank you so much for spending it with us.
You guys for having me.
Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you out there.
Easy.